Hi, and welcome back to another podcast from Lighthouse Christian Church. I'm Shirley Chancellor, and this is At the Table with Shirley. Today, we have a wonderful treat, a dear friend of mine. I've known her for several years. She does live on the other side of the country from me, but I have had the opportunity to meet her in person, and I can tell you she's just as beautiful on the inside as she is the outside. Her name is Glenda Bigalky. Hope I got that right. She has a master's in counseling, but operates as a transitional consultant. And we're going to get into that. But Glenda, first tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? How did you become led into your calling? Because I know you are a devout believer.
Mhm. So thank you, Shirley, for having me. It's so good to be with you as a friend and a colleague. So thank you. I grew up in a little community called Lipton, Saskatchewan. I grew up on a farm in Canada, and I was three miles out of this little community of 400 people. So I lived a very rural life, very simple, hardworking kind of community that I grew up in. And when I was 12, I went to a Lutheran camp for the weekend, and I saw something in my counselors that I knew was a little different. They weren't necessarily verbalizing things that made sense to me in a different way, but I was sensing in them that there was something that they had in their faith that was a little different than what I was currently experiencing. And so when I went home from that weekend, I literally just said, God changed me. And I realized that I wasn't maybe as loving as I wanted to be. And so I remember it was July 4th, 1977. I was laying on my bed and I just said, God changed me. And I started to desire to connect to people and to love people. So I started reading 1 Corinthians 13 and said, Lord, help me understand this and help me to love people the way you want me to love people. And that sort of led me to be kind of almost a little bit of a counselor in my small school. My graduating class was 12.
Oh,
So I
that
knew,
was tiny.
yes, it was tiny. So I knew everybody in high school and in junior high. We were all connected. And so I started just being sort of a shoulder to lean on. And really, honestly, probably by the time I was 14 or 15, started feeling like I was wanting to be a counselor. And then I also had a sister-in-law that's a social worker. And so I saw what she was doing, and that was intriguing to me. So I made the decision to do that. I went to school in Southern Alberta to get my bachelor's degree, and then I was led to Portland in 1986. So I moved from a community of 400 people to a city of over a million,
Wow.
and came to Portland to pursue my master's degree in counseling. So that's how I got my education. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. You work as a transitional consultant. Explain to us exactly what that means. What is your passion? They're transitioning from what to what?
Yeah, so I've been in private practice for 27 years, and with having written the book, I wrote a book called The Keys to Unlock Life Without Limits, Victim, Survivor, Warrior, the choice is yours. I've published that in September, and with that process, having gone through that process, I decided that it was helpful for me to start engaging with my clients on a little different level and being able to walk them through the process. I wrote it as a book and a workbook so that I could hand it to people and say, read chapter 3 and we'll talk about it. And so through that, then I've begun to do a little more teaching in person and hopefully a little bit more online as the time goes on here. So I'm just wanting to help people with whatever area of life that they're struggling with, whatever their current season of life is. If they're finding that they're struggling with perfectionism or they're struggling with anxiety, just in terms of what's happening in the world and all of the things that are going on, that I want to be able to walk people through their process and help them get on the other side of those kind of dynamics. And so transitional consultant being, we all have seasons of life, we all have different decades, changes of life, and just wanting to help people be able to make those transitions smooth, to continue to heal and grow and be who God wanted them to be ultimately.
Yeah, I've read your book, and of course, it's amazing. Those who haven't, we're going to share. Don't let me forget to share that too. I'll show them how they can get the book and let them see the book. But it is just full of, you call them keys, 9 keys. It's just full of resources and tools and strategies to help overcome a lot of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of mindsets and emotions and self-beliefs, things that we grew up believing about ourselves. And I noticed also when we talked earlier, you talked about how you like to help them examine their beliefs and how those impact their thoughts and impact their feelings. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, when we grow up in whatever family dynamic that we grow up in, that's where ultimately we learn lessons about life that become the foundation of our belief system. So I'm not just talking about our spiritual beliefs,
Right.
but I'm talking about our beliefs about everything. So our beliefs about ourself, our beliefs about relationships, our beliefs about communication or conflict resolution, and all of those things become the foundation and the basis then for how we think, which becomes the foundation and dictates how we feel. And then that dictates how we act. So we can often look at our actions and feel like we're not getting what we want out of life. And in order to change our actions permanently, we do have to go back and try to change our thought process and ultimately our belief system. And so that beliefs, thoughts, feelings, actions is a very foundational dynamic to many things that I teach because we want to address not only our actions if they're not healthy and getting us where we want to be in life, but also are we not processing our feelings correctly? Are we living in the extremes of denying our feelings, or are we getting stuck in so much emotion that we're not able to function well either, right? So we have to have a balance. Live as a warrior. I talk about in the book, we live as victims, survivors, or warriors. And so to live as a warrior, we need to be able to identify our feelings and express our feelings appropriately and not live in those extremes of denial or being over emotional. And so again, we can do something to change our feelings and how we approach our feelings, or change our thought process. Obviously, if we're not thinking healthily, thinking positively, we need to be able to renew our mind and change how we think. And then ultimately deal with the subconscious beliefs that might be going on underneath the surface that we're living out, that we're not even maybe consciously aware of. So the biggest thing I see with that, honestly, Shirley, is most people avoid conflict. Most people want to avoid conflict. And that is because their belief about conflict is that it's either just difficult or it's abusive.
Mm-hmm.
It's very damaging. It's very intense. And that has come from childhood often, or they didn't see their parents fight at all. So they didn't really see conflict resolved in a healthy way. And so they just retreat and are silent as well.
Yeah.
And so that belief system, all of those things we learn about communication and conflict resolution, we bring into our adulthood, and then we try to have relationships as adults, and it doesn't go well because we're not believing that actually conflict resolution is a positive thing, which it really is.
Yeah.
And we can go deeper in relationship with people if we just are willing to be honest with ourselves and honest with others, and hear each other and really connect to each other on a deeper level. So that beliefs, thoughts, feelings, actions is so foundational in terms of how we all function and focus our adult life. It's just a really huge foundational truth that I unpack each one of those as a key, a belief key, a thought key, a feeling key, and an action key. in my book.
Yes, and you did an amazing job in that. It kind of goes along with the law first mentioned, doesn't it? It's
Mhm.
much harder as an educator. It's something that we struggled with in the classroom, even with children, when they were taught something or had this mindset on something that wasn't right. It was harder to get them to undo those thought processes and to undo those mindsets than it was to teach a student who had no background or foundation on the topic at all. So it's a tough thing to work with those that have such a in ground mindset or thought about something that can change their whole life if they can just get past that.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. There's so many different dynamics that go into how we process our childhood. However, some people, because of their personality and just the dynamics of birth order and how many siblings they have and how they function in that family of origin, they feel like they've been victimized and they stay stuck in that victim mentality. And that's kind of what you're suggesting. They have a victim mindset or a victim mentality, and they really struggle to get out of that.
They do.
And often when they do make progress, they actually go the other extreme, which is to just be a survivor.
Yeah.
And that survivor person then ends up functioning better in life because they think a little healthier, but at the same time they kind of guard their hearts and they shut down and they don't necessarily have really open relationships. They give love more than they receive love, and they struggle as well. They're guarded, and they function well. There are movers and shakers in the world. They're making things happen, but they're not necessarily feeling whole themselves. And
Well,
so that victim mentality keeps us stuck. And some people stay there. Some people move to survivor and sort of get stuck there as well, instead of moving to the balanced place of being a warrior.
they've reached a comfortable plateau, which makes it harder for them. I'm comfortable here. I'm not going to let anyone come in and rock the boat. I've made it this far, when they could actually move on to the point of becoming a warrior and handle and fight those things as they come along, or have those what do you call them, confrontational uh, uh, conversations to stop it before it starts, and then have a much healthier relationship.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And the thing is, the way that we are created as human beings, we often gravitate to what we know. And so if we grow up in an environment that maybe wasn't very communicative or didn't resolve conflict, then we're often attracted to people that had a similar dynamic. It might have been different kinds of abuse or different kinds of neglect or whatever, but the reality is we're attracted to what's familiar. And so those two people grow up and they become adults, and then they struggle to communicate and to resolve their conflict. And then they don't necessarily teach their kids anything else through their example. And it just continues generation and generation and generation. And so my hope is that no matter how old, what season of life someone's in, that they can recognize that they have opportunity to change not only their actions, but they can change how they think and their belief system, and life can be much different for them personally and in relationship with other people.
Yes, it's amazing. We had an assistant pastor for a few years, youth pastor. I was an adult with a child who was in the youth group, but I still gleaned from his teaching. He was from Oregon, by the way, but he taught them that you could change the bend. You could
Hmm.
change the bend. You don't have to keep going down that same road that your parents went down.
That's really good. Yeah.
Change the bend in the road, and it made such an impact on me. And I think that's where I first, because I wasn't living as a believer at that time, and I was very angry and very, you've heard my story. I was a mess, but it kind of started me thinking that, I don't have to live this way. I don't have to finish life and go to the end of my life with these emotions and these beliefs about myself that I was always told. So having someone like you in their life to show them there is a better way and that they're really not living in reality, are they?
No, I mean, defense mechanisms. We all live in defense mechanisms to whatever degree we need to do that in order to survive, right? So whether it's just outright denial or we justify or minimize or blame, we do all of those defense mechanisms, and there's many ways we deny our own heart and shut down, and it keeps us again from living fully alive ourselves and from being able to experience relationship with other people. As you were talking about your childhood a little bit there and you realized that you could change that. I saw a really important and powerful demonstration. I think it was probably on Facebook on a reel at one point, and I'll try to describe it. And I've done it I've taught it in a class in a demonstration. So I have four glasses, just water glasses in a row, and they represent our grandparents, our parents, us, and our children. And so that first grandparent glass is full of water, and I put something in that to make it muddy, to make it a little dirty.
Mhm.
And so that is the reality of what our grandparents lived. They had all kinds of difficulties and traumas and abuses and hardships and depression, et cetera, et cetera. And so their lives were kind of muddied. Their water was muddied. And they poured that into our parents. And then, of course, our parents, for those of us that are baby boomers, our parents grew up in the silent generation. And so they just lived what they learned. And so their water was muddy as well. And then they did what they knew to do, and they didn't have the resources we have today. And so they poured into our glass as that third glass, and our glass was a little cloudy and muddy. But if we, at whatever stage of life we're at now, if we decide to pour in truth and pour in clear water, then ultimately, when we go to pour into the next generation, they'll have a clear glass of water instead of having it be clouded and muddy.
Oh,
And so that is such a beautiful visual of just the reality of generation after generation.
powerful.
Somebody stops it. If somebody says, I'm going to receive truth. I'm going to change how I think. I'm going to deal with my pain. I'm going to learn how to do things differently. Then we can pour into the next generation completely differently. And honestly, I encourage parents, it doesn't matter if they're young parents or if they're in their 40s or 50s or 60s. If they decide to change now and they decide to shift their thought processes or their belief systems, which will cause them to act differently, and they grow and change, it's still going to impact their children and their grandchildren, regardless of their age. And that's a beautiful thing.
It is.
Healing, healing and growth and transformation is always possible, always possible.
Oops, sorry, I had muted there for a minute. It reminded me too, going through that same time period I mentioned earlier of making a conscious decision that I was going to make life better for my daughter,
Mhm.
that I wasn't going to exhibit the same things for her to see and be a victim of that were presented to me. And very open and honest. I think they have to be very open and honest with the next generation too. To own and admit the mistakes that I made and to explain how much better her life could be if she didn't make the same mistakes. And
And
that was very powerful too.
that is powerful, Shirley. And the thing too is that often when you grow up in an environment that you don't want to replicate, the choice can be made to not replicate it. But sometimes again, just because of life experiences and because of a victim mentality, people do replicate it. And it does just continue generation after generation. So one of my keys is the key of choice that I talk about in the book. And so that is true, that we all have choices and we can all evaluate whether or not life is working for us and whether we want to make different choices than we had in our childhood. And that's the beauty of life, is we all have a will and we all have a choice to do things differently.
Sometimes as a victim, you don't feel like you have a choice. You feel, like you've said before, I've heard you say, you feel powerless.
Mhm. Yes, and that's really the deepest woundedness in people, is that when people grow up in environments where they haven't had choices, and whatever level of neglect or abuse or trauma they've experienced, they have felt powerless or helpless. Not that they could have identified that. If you ask a 5-year-old how they feel about their dysfunctional family dynamics, they're not going to be able to address that or identify that. But ultimately, that is what people feel, is powerless and helpless. And honestly, Shirley, that is such a challenge, because our human response to feeling powerless is to try to control. And so then we just do whatever we need to do to try to be in control of not only ourselves, but often other people. And we try to control circumstances that we can't control. And we try to feel better about ourselves and say, I'm never going to be that hurt again. I'm never going to be in this powerless place again.
Yes.
And then it sets us up again for unhealthy relationships, because we're either living in the extreme, again, as a victim, giving away our control because we think that's what is going to cause us to have some control in an odd way. Or we live in the other extreme as a survivor, and we try to control everything and everyone around us. And that keeps us from healthy relationships. And so living as a warrior, the key to that, and the keys that I talk about, the 9 keys that I talk about, if we utilize those keys, including our choices, including our belief system, our feelings, thoughts, actions, then if we utilize those the way that we're supposed to utilize those, we're controlling what we can control instead of giving our keys away, or instead of taking other people's keys. And that's when life is the most fruitful and abundant and healthy, and relationships can thrive, when we're taking responsible for our own life and living it the way that God intended for us, in terms of, utilizing the keys he's given us instead of giving those keys away or trying to take keys from other people.
It's a very fine line,
Yes, it is.
to not go one way, too far one way, to correct the direction that you have been going into. And you know what? I think that takes God to really be balanced. And I know in your case, being a counselor, that's somewhere you have to be very careful about approaching, but I know you do reflect that in your own life, and it's just, you beautifully do that.
Yeah, I can take people to a certain level of healing,
Yeah,
unless they're willing to look at their spiritual life, because we really do need to have the key ring. I talk about the key ring in my book being Holy Spirit, and we really do need to have that spiritual connection in order to give us the wisdom of how to use our keys, because it is a fine line.
it is.
And so, for instance, love, the key of love can be very misused and misunderstood.
Mm.
And I think especially sometimes in the church, we're taught, or we're told that you should just give and give and give and pour your life out. But we neglect to realize that God says, love one another as you love yourself, and
Yeah.
that there's balance there.
Yes.
And we do need boundaries, and we do need to have a line where at some point it's okay to say no to something else if we're starting to burn out and we're needing to take care of ourselves on a different level. So we do need wisdom beyond our own wisdom, absolutely, to be able to navigate life well and navigate those keys well.
Yes, and I love the way you brought that out in your book. You added that component in there because it is the missing key. And without it, you're right, we're never totally, completely healed without the help of the Holy Spirit, without God being involved in our life. Um, I I want to show them your book before we leave, but can you tell us a little bit more about the 9 keys? What is all involved in that?
So the 9 keys, as I just talked about, is love
Okay.
and motives. And
Motive.
that's a very interesting dynamic to
Yes.
talk. I've actually been teaching this concept for about 20 years, and I wasn't teaching motives as one of the components that we need to be aware of. But when I went to write my book, I realized how important that was, because what we value often creates our motives. And just like we were just talking about, our motive in loving somebody
Yeah.
might be healthy, but it might be for the wrong reasons. It might be that we're trying to get them to like us or for approval. So
A
that
form
might,
of manipulation.
yes. And so it might not be the healthiest thing to do. So our motives are a key. We have to examine our motives. And then I talk about the key of choices, which again, we have choices about everything we do and all the other keys and how we use them. I talk about the key of beliefs, the key of thoughts, feelings, actions, limits, and responses. And so in the book, I unpack all 9 of those keys, and I talk about what does that mean to own those keys, take responsibility for those keys,
Yeah.
the way that we're supposed to, and live in that balanced warrior place, or give them away, live as a victim, take other people's keys, live as a survivor in those extremes. And so I address each one of those keys individually and talk about what does it mean to love one another, but love ourselves as well, to have a healthy mutual giving and receiving of love, not just
Yeah.
giving, and not just being a victim and taking.
Yes.
So in each one of those keys, I talk about how that looks in victim, survivor, warrior,
Yes.
how that looks in a practical way.
It does. And I especially love the topic of motives because I have to question, even now at this point in my spiritual walk, uh, if I'm thinking about doing something or addressing something or sharing something, to stop and ask myself, well, what's the real point in sharing that? Is it to get it off my chest, but will it be better for the one I'm sharing it with? Or, is it going to make their life better? Examining those motives is very important.
That's really good, Shirley. Yeah, it is. And it's something that we have to sort of keep top of mind, because otherwise we just sort of put blinders on and go
Yeah.
through life and we don't think about why we do what we do.
Yeah. I've unloaded it, so I feel better. But what about the person I've unloaded it onto?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And just like with motives, as I said, we don't think about why we do what we do. Sometimes we don't think about what we're thinking about.
Yes.
And we don't realize how negative our thought processes are, or where we allow our mind to go, that keeps us stuck in some victim mindset or a mindset that's not healthy. Instead of reining those feelings in, instead of taking those thoughts captive and saying, I don't need to think about that. I can think about positive things. I can think about good things. I can think about being present and present future instead of getting stuck in the past. That's vitally important as well, in terms of thinking about what we're thinking about and realizing sometimes our thoughts aren't taking us in healthy directions.
No, they're not. The Lord gave me a strategy years ago. I wrote about it too. It's pause, ponder, and pray.
Mm-hmm.
Stop, think about it, pray about it before you go forth with it. It's good time right there to examine your motives.
That's very good. Yeah.
Yeah, to make sure that it is something that's going to be a positive influence on someone, or just, to share to be sharing, or to
Mhm.
say something to be saying something, or it's something that you can't take back. I know it has really, and your keys too. I put those into practice. I absolutely loved your book. I hope everyone who hears this podcast will get your book, because no matter where you are in your stage of walk, faith walk, or relationships, wherever you are, there is something in that book that can help everyone. It is amazing and powerful and anointed book. I can vouch for that. Well, tell people how they can connect with you, where they can find you, what platforms you're on.
Yes, if people are interested in getting a taste of the book, you can go to my website, which is www.glendabigalky.com, and download a free chapter, and that will give you a little bit of a taste of what we started talking about today. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, and I also did my first Bible plan on the Bible app on anger. And it's a 7-day plan, and it's called Redeeming Anger, Turning Pain into Purpose. So for anybody that has the Bible app or that's interested in pursuing topics in the Bible app, you just go to the plans and to anger, and then scroll down and you'll find my 7-day plan, Redeeming Anger, Turning Pain into Purpose. And that will help people connect to maybe some things that are going on under their anger, some of the feelings they might be feeling, and how buttons get pushed and those kind of things.
Yes,
So I have some practical answers there for people as well.
that's awesome. Now that's on the YouVersion app, right?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, the YouVersion Bible app. Yeah.
Yes. And a lot of people have that app for Bible study. They don't realize there's a wealth of knowledge in there in the Bible plans.
Mhm.
I'm going to share here just a minute. I want them to see your book. And of course, I'm on the wrong thing.
Here you are.
Yes, the keys to unlock life without limits, victim, survivor, warrior. The choice is yours. It is an amazing book. I can vouch for it. Um, it's a book that you will refer to back to time and time again. Maybe when you're wanting to help someone or counsel someone, or someone that's struggling in a certain area, that book is a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of resources. And we will put the links for Glenda into the comment section of this video, and it'll be on YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, Facebook, my website, her website. So you can connect with her in many different ways, but do go to her website. Tell them again how they can find you, your website.
It's glendabigalky.com.
Okay. And it will also be the link. We will share the link with them, and download that free chapter.
And Shirley, I was just going to also suggest my email address if people just want to reach out to me. An email is unlockinglife@glendabigalky.com. And my heart and my hope is to connect to people and to lead them through whatever they're going through. Again, challenges, transitions, understanding their own struggles with anger, conflict, all of those things. And I do hope to continue to do a little bit more connection online as well, and even begin to teach classes through online communication. So I appreciate so much you having me today, and it's good to see you and be with you,
You
even from
too. And I
so
hope you will connect with a lot of people. I hope they'll use your email and get in touch with you. All right. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next